Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Comic Source Comic Boom collaboration. This is our Black Adam special.
Woohoo!
Yeah, super excited to talk about the movie. Just so everybody knows, there's going to be spoilers. That'll be more in the second half of the episode. So if you're just here to kind of learn about Black Adam in general and what we think maybe might help you going into the movie, what you need to know, we're going to cover that first. But before we do any of that, I do want to give Rocky a shout out. If you guys are listening to this, um, and you have not gone and watched his Black Adam episode that he did like a year ago, I really highly recommend that you guys do that because he goes into spec on what books to pick up, and he put it out a year ago, so he had plenty of time. Now I imagine those books are probably at their peak prices. But in that episode, you can get a lot more. He went more into depth than we're gonna have time to go into here on the history of Black Adam and comics because again, we're gonna actually talk about the movie in the second half of this episode. So if you haven't done so already, highly recommend you guys go and check that out. Just go to his channel. You're watching this on
Yeah,
YouTube, obviously, and
yeah.
just
I'll
search
leave a
for Black
link. I'll
Adam
leave a
movie.
link below at the YouTube channel on this channel on the YouTube. I'll leave a link below to that video.
Yeah, cool. That's perfect. So yeah, definitely do that. All right. So real quickly before we start talking and give even our initial thoughts about the movie, uh, let's kind of talk about who Black Adam is as a character. So initially, when he was created, way back in the Golden Age, appears in Marvel Family #1, which is a highly, highly expensive book, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars, because it's his first
It's
appearance
pretty
and
expensive.
early,
Yeah.
yeah, early appearance of Captain Marvel Jr. and Mary Marvel and the whole Marvel family. But when he was created, he was basically created as this evil version of Captain Marvel, Shazam, if you will. Think Mirror Universe. Surprised he didn't have a goatee, but it's why his costume was pretty much identical to Captain Marvel's, except it was black and yellow instead of red and yellow. So always a mustache twirling villain. Didn't actually show up a lot in the Golden Age. Had his first appearance, had the story, was defeated, turned to dust basically, and uh, because he was evil, he wasn't evil in the beginning, but this initial story has been reprinted a few times, but he was given the power by the wizard Shazam, just like Captain Marvel, was eventually corrupted by the power, turned evil, and back then the story was the wizards couldn't take the power away from him. So what they did was they banished him to the farthest star, and it took him 5,000 years to fly back to Earth. So he flies back to Earth. You get ancient Egypt, flies back to Earth. By the time he gets back to Earth, it's 1945. So that's that Marvel family. That's the circa era that it came out in. And he shows up. They defeat him. They trick him into saying Shazam. He loses his powers because he's 5,000 years old. He dies. He turns to dust. So that's about it for Golden Age appearances. And then reprinted that in the modern age, really. Well, maybe you want to say the Bronze Age.
Yeah.
And then he started to show up in various DC comics. But by that time, DC had owned all the Fawcett characters. So, but he was still very much a villain.
Yeah.
Was never this anti-hero or vigilante or anything. He was always a villain, and it wasn't until he started to be used a little more by Jerry Ordway, actually, in the Power of Shazam series, which came out in the '90s, where it started to have these ideas of him being a little more sympathetic as a character. I don't want to go so far as to say heroic, but they kind of changed it to where he wasn't always just this out and out bad guy. So were you a fan of that? I mean, I love Jerry Ordway's art, but I've never read his Power of Shazam
Straight up, I
series.
wasn't. I wasn't. I shouldn't say I wasn't a fan. I just wasn't a diehard fan. Shazam itself, Captain Marvel, I've never found to be a particularly really interesting. It was never a must buy for me. I always liked when he showed up as a guest star, but I never really collected much of his series, although I have since obtained his series. I straight up, I always thought Black Adam was a more compelling character. I even have two of Black Adam's first appearance, which I bought actually. As a young boy, I bought them in a comic book store back when I was really young, and so I don't know. I've always been a fan of I've been a fan of Shazam, but I haven't really diehard collected the series. But there's no question that, in my view, Black Adam has really come into his own, especially with the New 52 series, starting around 2006 with that 52 weekly series that Jeff Johns and Mark Waid and Rucka and Grant Morrison all combined their efforts on. His story, the modern day story of Black Adam that we see tweaked a little bit here for the movie is really where this character comes into finds its own.
Yeah, which is kind of interesting to me because again, he always felt like he had a lot of potential as a villain, but it was never fully realized until that Power of Shazam series,
Yeah.
where where Ordway really kind of leaned into him being this evil mirror version of Captain Marvel. But I guess I think that even though that's a kind of a deeper dive into the character and kind of making more use of him, that when Jeff Johns got a hold of the character in his JSA run, this is pre Flashpoint, pre New 52, that he thought, I think that it would be more interesting to have Black Adam as this anti-hero, because that's really the seeds of where he's at currently, right? So in that JSA series, Black Adam, again, highly recommend Jeff Johns' JSA series. And it's not super expensive. It's relatively, although I guess the first appearance of Cyclone is probably the most expensive book there now. But anyway, Jeff Johns really planted the seeds for where Black Adam is now. When he had Black Adam at various times fighting along the Justice Society and realizing that Teth Adam was a good guy back in the day. And it was just this power that he had used for so long to be the champion of Kondak that kind of corrupted him. And that JSA series is also the first time that they change it to Kondak. Previous to that, he was always Egyptian, and then they create this this other country, and they talk about his love of Kondak. So yeah, that's all in JSA.
The Black Rain series is what it is. Like,
Yeah,
there's a whole
yeah,
slew of there's a lot of these are classic covers.
yeah.
Black
Alex
Rain
Ross
series,
covers.
really good stuff. It crosses over into Hawkman as well, where there's a great there's a great series of covers where Hawkman fights where Hawkman fights Black Adam. And so you can really see the genesis of the movie if you look at the history of Black Adam if you look at the modern day evolution of Black Adam in the comic books, you really see the genesis of the storyline when you get into Black Adam, the movie, which is very interesting. And as we'll talk about, I'm interested to hear your thoughts about how they tweaked Black Adam's origin in the movie. I actually, surprisingly enough, I actually kind of enjoyed what they did in the movie, but we'll talk about that as we get into it.
Yeah, because again, it was this idea of him, the original Fawcett creation. He was, the son of a pharaoh and did some good deeds and got the powers. But then when we switch to the modern day Kondak JSA origin, get him out of Egypt, then all of a sudden it becomes he was a slave, and he was given the powers by the Wizard of Shazam to kind of be the champion of Kondak and free it from slavery and the over seers that were oppressing them. So we go from that JSA run. He had a pretty big role in Infinite Crisis, where, from JSA, you could argue he was on the side of angels. And then in Infinite Crisis, he actually joins the Monster Society of Evil. Again, classic Mr. Mind villain who's basically this genius in the mind of a worm. Classic Captain Marvel villain. And the only reason that he joins that, because again, it's really establishing this idea of Black Adam as the champion of Kondak, and Infinite Crisis going on, world's going crazy. Mr. Mind is offering Black Adam a chance to be able to protect Kondak. That's all he cares about in the chaos of Infinite Crisis going on. So, the ends justify the means in his mind. So even though he'd been kind of heroic, he'd been a member of Justice Society, now he's actually joined the Secret Society of Supervillains. So from there, we go into the 52 series that Rocky mentioned. Now, this is where you really start getting into some of the things that you see in the movies, although they are changed. This is where we see Adriana Tomaz for the first time. This is where we see her become Isis. So yeah, that's a little bit of a spoiler, I suppose. There's no hints in the movie if you don't realize, Adriana Sarah Shahai's character, um, is the one that becomes Isis at some point in the comics. There's no hints of that in the movie, but in this 52 series, you get that weekly series. There's a lot of it that's focused on Black Adam and Isis and their journey, and then that kind of as an aftermath to that, we get World War III, where Adam, in some ways, kind of, you got to say he leans more into his villainous side, but again, always because of either one of two things: either wanting to protect Kondak, or the guy's got a temper and he doesn't believe in letting things go, right? So if you hurt his family, if you hurt his nation, he is going to attack you, even if that's proactive, even if it's not quote unquote in the act of self defense. He's going to go after you.
Yeah,
Um,
and in fact, I should say that if you do read the Black Adam, if you read the 52 series, you're going to know what the because it leads into a DC comic book event called World War III. It's the death of someone very close to Black Adam that makes him go nuts, makes him go crazy, facilitating World War III. You can very easily guess what the premise might be for a Black Adam 2.
yeah,
and that's what I like about it. If they just base it loosely on the comic book source material, this could be a really good sequel. I think this was a really good movie, and that like I say, that the seeds of great Black Adam movie storytelling are there, as long as they don't deviate too much from the source material. And I think they honored it here with Black Adam, as we'll talk about. So you know,
yeah, and that gets us to the New 52 era, which starting in issue 7, I believe, of Justice League, which was the kind of the flagship title when they relaunched. It was the first book that came out, written by Jeff Johns, great Yvonne Reese art. Um, and it basically retells the origin, but it's still that same origin. What's interesting is, some of the things when the New 52 got switched, um, this kind of restart of all the titles and new number ones, some characters got tweaked, and then other characters didn't. Like really Batman, not much happened to Batman. It kind of continued. Not much happened to Green Lantern. Same writers still on it, and it just continued. Black Adam, again, in the hands of Jeff Johns, it's just kind of a continuation of what, was there before. And then what's interesting is those tweaks that happened in the New 52, eventually they all got rolled back, and DC brought their legacy characters back because they realized they had thrown the baby out with the bathwater and gotten rid of the very thing that made the DC universe so special. But those backups in Justice League I highly recommend. They've been collected into a hardcover or a soft cover. Just do a search for like Black Adam Jeff Johns, and you'll get that retold origin that kicks off the New 52, and that kind of brings us into the modern time. He has been a member of the Justice League. We saw him in Infinite Frontier and some of the things that happened there with what was destined to happen to Kondak in the future, and then he comes back from the future in a way, although it was never quite clear. Now is it two guys? A bit of a mess, to be honest, and we've talked about that in our DC spotlights about this Mighty Adam was his name, when he very first got the powers, but there's like a young version of him, and what exactly is going on, and he's trying to prevent the tragedy of the future and things that we saw in Future State. So a little bit up in the air, but if we talk about just overall the evolution of the character, he definitely has gone from this kind of two-dimensional mustache twirling villain to more of an anti-hero with a dark edge, with a temper. It's one thing to be an anti-hero where you're a good on one day and bad on the other, uh,
mm.
whether you're given into your darker tendencies or something like that, something along the lines of a Dark Phoenix character. The thing that you can always count on about Black Adam is he's always going to have that edge. He's always who he is, and he always has that temper, and he believes in the idea of revenge, not justice, but revenge. And that's something they really pulled into the movie as well. So we're going to pivot into talking about the film now. Anything else to say about Black Adam in comics before we move over, Rock?
No, I think you summed it up rather well. Let's just get into the movie. It's awesome.
Yeah, and we'll give our opinion on the movie, then we'll talk real quick about. I really do think you don't need to know anything from comics to go and enjoy the movie. Although I do think what's interesting is they put out those Black Adam Justice Society files one shots. We read them, we reviewed them on our regular DC Spotlight. I almost feel like, and they introduce you to Atom Smasher, they introduce you to this version of Hawkman, they introduce you to Cyclone, they introduce you to Doctor Fate. But I sort of feel like I would get more out of those comics if I went back and read them now after seeing the movie. What do you think?
Well, they did actually have comic books, as you said, for each of those characters, and it's really all the. I mean, I think we reviewed them all, and we
Yeah.
reviewed them all, and I don't think it's absolutely necessary, but it would be helpful. I mean, you don't really know a lot about the background of Hawkman, or like you said, or Cyclone, or Cyclone, or Atom Smasher in the movie, but I don't think the movie suffers because of that. I think that you get some extra information in the comics that I think would is maybe a little bit helpful, and so it's one of those things where if you're a comic collector, yeah, you get the extra bonus and you get some additional information that is probably going to be in the book or the novel that'll come out of the movie. I'm sure they'll do one of those. They'll do a novelization of the movie, and you always get extra Easter eggs when you get the comic or the novel of a movie adaptation.
Yeah, 100%. So I would say this: if you're curious about it, I don't think it's necessary to read those one shots before you go and see the movie. But if you go and see the movie and you love it and you want more of these characters, then go read those comics, because again, I think they're definitely not necessary to understand the film and enjoy it. But if you love it and you want more of this world and this version of this corner of DC, then go and read those one shots after. And they're not expensive at all. It's not like they were big hits and they're hard to find. I'm sure that you can pick them up at your local comic shop. So, all right, everybody, if you have tuned in to kind of learn about Black Adam, this is where and you don't want spoilers for the film because you haven't seen it yet. This is probably the point where you want to turn it off and come back after you've seen the film, because we're about to get into spoiler territory and talk about the film. So yeah, give us your initial thoughts, Rocky, in a couple of sentences. Uh,
I
from
thought this.
context, what you said so far, it seems like you
Yeah,
liked it.
yeah, I thought this was a I thought this was a great movie. I love this movie. I thought this summed up the character very well. I thought this was action packed. I thought this was extremely well paced. I thought that the writing, there were some. I think there was some maybe hiccups here and there, but very minor ones. This was fun, and this was easy to follow. I thought it actually had some themes. It planted the seeds for interesting takes of different ideas about the use of lethal force, about even political American hegemony versus Middle Eastern country, about dictatorship versus benevolent dictatorship versus democracy. All just right up to good and bad. What really makes this movie work is that this isn't a movie about saving the world, although the big bad Sabek, the big bad villain at the end, there's that big bad third act where he's fighting a villain. The fact is that this movie is grounded not in a worldwide huge threat, really. It felt like it was grounded in a relationship between a father and a son, both Black Adam's original son from 5,000 years ago and also his sort of quasi son through Adriana, the other character in the movie. It's grounded in his relationship with that and his sort of his seeking of redemption, trying to find his place in this new world and this new Kandak, which is different than the one that he was essentially imprisoned away from 5,000 years before. I thought it worked. I thought it worked very well. I'm frankly astonished at the degree to which some critics at the low Rotten Tomatoes score. I'm right with the audience score on this at 89% and rising. So, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I loved it. I've seen it twice already. Which I got to be honest, it surprised me a little bit how much I enjoyed it. This has been in development for so long, 10 years. Dwayne Johnson has been wanting to bring this to the screen. I have so many questions about why he chose Black Adam. In my mind, he is going to be as synonymous as with this character as Christopher Reeve is with Superman. In my mind,
Yeah.
he's embodied the character extremely well. It's so interesting to me, this long gestation period, because it has allowed DC slowly over time to, purposely or not, uh, a positive thing or not, that can be debated. But in comics, Black Adam has slowly started to look more like this version, the live action version, in terms of he no longer has the widow's peak. He's no longer. Um, he used to be such a thin character, right? Like just his body type. He was very thin, very
Yeah.
elongated. Um, and now he's much bigger. He does look more like a mirror version
Yeah.
of Captain Marvel. So I find that stuff to be interesting. But the thing is, I'm not a wrestling fan at all. Obviously, you don't have to be a wrestling fan to be aware of The Rock as he transitioned to movies. Um, and he's somebody whose movies I would go and see once in a while. I think Walking Tall was one that I saw, and then he had another one. I can't remember the name of it, but he goes to retrieve this rich guy's son who is in some African country or South American country, looking for an artifact. Sean William Scott, I think, is the
That's right.
character.
Yeah, I can't remember the
Yeah,
name of it either, but
yeah, I can't remember it, but it's a fun movie and whatever.
yeah,
So I say that to say that, yeah, The Rock, whatever. I'm aware of him. His movies can be fun, but they're not exactly, oh my god, greatest thing ever, and he's an awesome actor. Um, so what was so interesting to me is, in a little bit of a way, I felt like this was a vanity project, right? For The Rock to be involved in it for so long, and it was almost like a, hey, I want to be a superhero. This is this quote unquote superhero that I want to be, that I want to portray on the big screen. This is all about me. Um, uh, it's going to spotlight me and who I am. And so I didn't really have expectations because, again, I'm not a big Rock fan. I'm like, I'll go see it, maybe, whatever. I sort of got tired of hearing about it, to be honest. It just took so long. And so I was curious enough to go on the first day, and again, my expectations were very low. I didn't really expect to like it, and I'm not even sure why I went. Like, I haven't gone to see the latest DC movies in theaters. I never went and saw Suicide Squad. I have never seen any of the Shazam movies, not let alone in theaters. I haven't seen these movies at all. Didn't go see Matt Reeves' Batman, but for some reason, maybe it was these other characters, wanted to see Hawkman and Atom Smasher, Doctor Fate, Cyclone on the screen. I went. And here's the thing about it, right? It's a fantastic movie. I loved it. It surpassed all my expectations. And what I thought was most impressive was that all those things that I thought about Dwayne Johnson wanting to have a movie where he's on the screen the entire time and, hey, look at me, I'm the greatest thing ever. It's not that. Dwayne Johnson knew enough and wanted this movie to be good and successful, that he stepped back and he allows those other characters to have their moments and to shine. And when we talk about critics, I saw one of the stupidest movie reviews I've ever seen in my life. I won't name the article or the author because I don't want to give it any oxygen, any clicks. But I did see somebody that said, yeah, this has been a long time coming in development for Johnson's ascent into superhero films. And I don't know why it wastes time on other characters. All we need is Johnson to punch some stuff. I'm like, that is the exact opposite. All the other reviews are talking about how it leans into tropes and it's boring and it doesn't cover any new ground or anything like that. And this guy is actually advocating for that. I'm like, this movie is so much more than Dwayne Johnson punching stuff. And that's what's great about it. That's what gives it the feel. Being able to see Hawkman and Doctor Fate and Cyclone and Atom Smasher. And yeah, we don't learn a heck of a lot about him. It's interesting. Hawkman might be the one that gets the most screen time other than Black Adam, and we learn the least about him. But maybe it's one of those things where they want to pique people's curiosity so they can do a Hawkman movie. I have no idea. Um, but I did find that interesting. And one of the strengths of the movie, I think, is its supporting cast. And not just these four Justice Society members, but Sarah Shahai as Adriana Tomaz, and then her son, Amon, um, which I think the guy's name is Bodhi. I don't know his last name.
yeah,
But he
yeah.
plays her son. And again, that's a little bit of a change from what we got in the comics. So, do you want to talk about the change to the origin, Rocky?
Yeah, the change to the origin. I mean, essentially, when I say origin, I'm going to focus on the New 52 origin of DC Comics, and essentially, what the New 52 origin of Black Adam is that essentially 5,000 years ago he was a slave, and it was his brother. It was actually Teth Adams' brother who got the power of Shazam, and he basically betrayed his brother, killed his brother, and got the power of and became Black Adam. And that's basically the redemption that he's always fighting against in the present. And the way that and it's interesting that in the New 52, Jeff Johns had something to do with the writing of that origin. Jeff Johns is the producer, is one of the producers of the Black Adam movie, and I find it interesting that one of the ways that he tweaked the origin here, which I think is more effective emotionally, is that the Teth Adam 5,000 years ago, it's actually Teth Adams' son Harut who became the champion of Kandak and got the powers of Shazam, and in trying to save his father, gave his father Teth Adam the power of Shazam to save him, but then got killed by the king's guards. And ultimately, it's that rage then that in the trailers you'll see that, of course, and in the movie as well, obviously, but Teth Adams, Black Adam states, my powers were born of rage, and because when he gained the powers of Black Adam, or I guess Shazam gained the powers of Black Adam, that coincided very quickly with the death of his son Harut, and out of rage, he attacked the kingdom of Kandak and destroyed it. And as punishment, the wizards that gave him his power, which were based on the Egyptian gods, which are different than the gods that Shazam has, Captain Marvel has. We should maybe clarify that. These are a different set of gods. They're Egyptian gods as opposed to more Greek gods for Captain Marvel, Billy Batson. But he gains his powers, but then he's essentially caged away. And and they link it also with the origin of Sabak, who this crown of Sabak, which is powered by 7 demons, and before the king can put on the crown of Sabak, uh, that's when Teth Adam, as you know, Black Adam attacks, and then the castle is destroyed, and then 5,000 years later, and the movie opens with 5,000 years later with Adriana, who's an archaeologist, a former college professor, looking for anything to do with Black Adam and stumbling upon it that way. So I thought it emotionally that the changing of that origin of Black Adam to make it that his son was actually it was his son who was worthy of being the champion, not him. And so there's throughout the movie, it's Black Adam coming to terms with the fact that he feels like a failure, but he's so filled with rage, and it's still with him even 5,000 years later. And the movie is his character arc. His hero's journey is trying to find some kind of redemption, and that's what grounds the movie. And that's why it works so well for me, this movie, is that what grounded it was his relationship with his son, the memory of his son, and also vicariously through Amon, who is Adriana's son, and Adriana's son, and just that grounds the whole movie. And Amon, he that's why Black Adam in the movie is close to or sort of talks quite a bit with Adriana and Amon, and I think that's the emotional core of the movie for me. But what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. So let me go back a little bit and talk. One of the other things about why I was a little wary of this film, and I've said this many times. I'm not the biggest fan of in comics when they take a villain and make him a hero. We don't have enough good villains. But what happens is a villain gets so popular that they being the comic publishers want them to be around, more, and so you end up seeing them take these heroic turns. It's happened with, you could argue that Namor may be most similar to Black Adam and has been on both sides, but they've done it with even characters like Doctor Doom. They're doing it with Green Goblin right now. Obviously, Lex Luthor was a member of the Justice League of America at one point. Harley has become a hero and will remain a hero because she's just too popular. And it's like it's this old morality tale where well, we don't want to promote somebody who's doing outright evil things. How can they have their own comic? Well, we'll turn them into a hero. And sometimes they go from villain to anti-hero, straddling the line to hero, like Harley has. Other times they kind of stay in that gray area, like Black Adam has. But what I've realized during this long tenure development is, the seeds were already planted for that long before Dwayne Johnson got involved. And I think the first time that Black Adam was mentioned as showing up in a film, he was going to be the villain in the Shazam, the first Shazam movie. And everybody just thought, oh, he's just a villain. He's just a villain. But even then, the seeds had already been planted by Jeff Johns in the JSA run and in the Justice League backup in New 52 that, yeah, he wasn't all bad. And he did carry that guilt around of having killed his brother and stolen his powers. But when you talk about bringing that to the big screen, I think, and rightly so, Dwayne Johnson's probably like, well, if we go that route, that's sort of an irredeemable act, in a lot of people's mind. That's an irredeemable action that he killed his brother and stole his powers. That's going to be a tough sell. So I think that's probably why they chose to make this change, and instead of having it be him going out and seeking the power, his son bestowing the powers upon him, his son immediately being killed, and then that anger and that rage. I mean, I can certainly say as a father how devastated I would be if one of my children were taken from me, and especially if they had just done something to save me. And he's thinking probably at that moment when his son is killed is, no, it should have been me. You should have kept the powers. You gave up your powers to save me, and then you immediately were killed. I mean, that's just I think the rage is understandable. I think his desire for revenge and to go after the king is 100% understandable. So I think it works. And then, yeah, to your point about how when he wakes up 5,000 years later, he does seem to have this connection to Adriana's son, Amon, which if you go and read a lot of those story arcs that we talked about when we were talking about the comics, especially the New 52, it's in that story, Amon is not Adriana's son. He's Adriana's brother. So that's something else they changed, which again, I think works really well. But he eventually becomes Osiris. He becomes part of the Marvel or Black Marvel family, they call it. So he eventually gets superpowers as well, which I love the Amon character in the movie. He's a huge DC fan. His room is covered with comics and action figures and posters of DC,
and
and
that
these
led
are
to
modern.
some great moments where there was a fight scene in his
Yeah,
room with and you can talk about that. I quite enjoyed that.
yeah. So again, and very modern. I mean, we're talking like the Jim Lee cover of Superman Unchained version of Superman, the Batman logo from the Grant Morrison run that looks very modern. Yeah. So later in the movie, when Hawkman and Black Adam again, Black Adam, he wakes up. The Justice Society is aware of the fact that he almost destroyed Kahndaq as a country through his rage. He's not a hero, which again, it's leaned into here with this tweak of origin. He's so reluctant. He never asked for the powers. He wasn't deemed worthy of the powers by the wizards and given the powers. His son was. His son is very much more of a heroic Harut, very much of a more heroic, pure of heart type character. And he, even before he gets the powers, when he's talking to his son, he's like, freedom is for the birds, better to keep your head down kind of thing. He's not this person who's just, pure of spirit and very heroic. He's if he does take a hero turn in this film, it is he's more of a reluctant hero. So to have him face off against a Justice Society who knows how dangerous he can be, I think Hawkman at one point calls him a weapon of mass destruction. Even though they try to work together and get along for the good of Kahndaq, there are these conflicts that arise, and one of them happens in the apartment of Adriana and Amon, and yeah, Hawkman and Black Adam end up duking it out in Amon's bedroom, and every time one of them goes to punch the other, or Hawkman goes to slash at Black Adam with his wings, they dodge and end up punching Aquaman's poster, punching Aquaman in the face, or punching Superman in the face, or punching Batman in the face. So it's almost
There's
like
there's a great Doomsday reference because there's one where Black Adam's fist smashes through a wall and smashes into the Superman S symbol, and it's the same comic book image of Doomsday's fist smashing back in 1992, a classic image of Doomsday's fist smashing into a Superman S, and so it's for those who are diehard comic book fans like us. It put a smile on my face, that entire sequence, and so it was pretty good.
yeah, it leans into this idea that Dwayne Johnson has been promoting and marketing about this is a new era of DC films. Black Adam is the strongest there is. I mean that can be completely debated, but this is the character he's playing. Why would I want the actor of whichever hero they're playing? I want them to advocate for their role. I want Aldous Hodge to say Hawkman's the best. Hawkman's the best hero. I want Pierce Brosnan to say Dr. Fate's the most powerful. Like you want that. You want them to lean into the role and be excited. So I have absolutely no problem with Dwayne Johnson saying, yeah, Black Adam, he's the most powerful character in the DCU, and he's certainly up there. He's certainly up there. When we talk about hero, we talk about even though he's immortal, I'll say mortals as opposed to obviously if you go to gods or great darkness, things like that, the demon Nezha, maybe now you're transcending. But I want them to feel like they're the most powerful, and I felt like this was a tongue in cheek way for Dwayne Johnson to say, yeah, Black Adam, he could even take out the Justice League. So that was a heck of a lot of fun. Um, Again, full spoilers, everybody. Dr. Fate does sacrifice himself toward the end of the movie. And this leans into something that's very Hollywood. So I'm not the biggest Dr. Fate fan. I haven't read like every Dr. Fate comic ever, but I will say that whenever Dr. Fate showed up, and he certainly showed up a lot in All-Star Squadron, which is where I first read his adventures on a regular basis, I don't ever remember seeing Dr. Fate not in costume, not with the faceless helm on. He always had the costume. He always was in costume. You didn't see Kent Nelson, you saw Dr. Fate, which the helmet that he wears, the helmet of Nabu, who's a Lord of Order, which again, early on back in the day, very much black and white, good guy, bad guy. And then as time's gone on, you want to tell new stories, you want to be more nuanced, a little more sophisticated. It became this idea that the Lords of Order aren't all good and the Lords of Chaos aren't all bad. And Kent Nelson's actually possessed by, when he puts the helmet on, by Naboo. And so it's not even Kent Nelson. So I say all that to say this. He's hardly in costume at all, because if you're Hollywood, if you're a movie studio, you're not going to pay Pierce Brosnan to be in your movie and then cover his face the entire time. So he walks around holding the helmet, which is just so awkward and so weird to me the entire time. But when he does sacrifice himself in the fight against Sabak and the helmet is left there. Now, again, I know that in the comics, Amon becomes Osiris, becomes part of the Black Marvel family, but there's a newer Dr. Fate, Khalid, who's Middle Eastern, that gets the helmet. He's the one that wears it now. I kind of wanted toward the end of the movie, I wanted Amon to get the helmet and maybe he becomes the new Dr. Fate. I just thought it would be so interesting to make that change, but I don't know. We get a Black Adam too, whether we'll get Amon as Osiris or as another hero. I still think it could work. But yeah, I wanted that so bad. As soon as I saw that helmet laying there after the fight with Sabak, I'm like, come on, Amon, pick up the helmet, give him on the helmet. He's just a huge comic fan, a huge DC fan, a huge superhero fan in general. He's almost like our younger selves on the screen. So what do you think about the idea of Amon becoming Dr. Fate?
Well, it's fine. It's kind of maybe sort of hinted at. There was a really nice scene in the movie where Amon throws on a cape or throws on a blanket and looks in the mirror and pretends to be a superhero. And Cyclone is behind him talking to Adriana, his mom, and she's using her wind powers to make the cape fly in the air as Amon
Yep.
looks in the mirror and he pretends he's kind of like maybe Superman or I guess Black Adam, because Black Adam's his hero. And it's really Amon who is really like this, almost like Amon and Adriana are like the spokespeople who argue with the JSA saying, look, Black Adam's our hero. Okay, where the hell are you guys? Where's the Justice League protecting Middle Eastern countries? Just because we're different and maybe we got a different political structure. Where the hell are you protecting us? Kandak in this movie has had different terrorist groups controlling it for almost centuries. And in this case, in the movie, it's Intergang controlling it. And now all of a sudden, the Justice Society has the unmitigated goal to show up finally after 5,000 years, their champion returns. And the JSA is going to take it upon itself to say, no, we're going to put you in prison or we're going to cage you. I was 100%. I love that debate, and I'm 100% in favor of Adriana and the people of Kandak on that. Flip a bird to Amanda Waller. Flip a bird to all of them. You know, I mean, let Kandak, you know, choose their own people. But to get back to your central point about Dr. Fate, Amon, there's no indication that Amon's going to assume the helmet of Dr. Fate, but it's maybe possible, and it would be kind of cool. Armand could go one of two ways. He could ultimately go on to become Osiris if he follows the more comic book example. On the other hand, it might just all be misdirection. But the bottom line is, what I love about Dr. Fate, the way that he goes out, it's the way that Hawkman at one point fights Sabak. And it's a fantastic scene. It's a fantastic fight scene. And ultimately, Hawkman does something with the helmet. After Dr. Fate is gone, the helmet of Naboo is still lying on the ground. And through a wonderfully choreographed scene, just when you think that Hawkman also is killed, he's not, because he's utilized some illusion and misdirection because of the helmet of Naboo. It worked fantastic. It really worked well. I really enjoyed the choreography in this movie and the way it all played out. And it's the choreography and the special effects combined with very good acting, despite even limited screen time for Cyclone and Atom Smasher, that really made this work. But just a further comment on Dr. Fate. Dr. Fate, I loved all the JSA in this movie. Dr. Fate, and I mentioned this to you before, a couple of things. First one is they changed his symbol. His Ankh symbol is actually slightly different, and I don't know why they did that. If they were afraid because it's the symbol of life, and which is because the life and death plays that theme of life and death and the power of life and death giving. Death must occur before life occurs for Sabak. That sort of theology and faith that sort of plays its role, and Dr. Fate plays that sort of centerpiece. Dr. Fate is sort of like he's the exact opposite of Sabak. Sabak is the embodiment of death, and whereas Dr. Fate is the idea of life, and so his sacrifice inspires ultimately back at him. But Dr. Fate, I had some issues maybe with, and this is nitpicking, I wasn't a huge fan of like the booming voice of Dr. Fate when he spoke in the helmet, but it worked. But I thought, well, maybe it was a little booming. I thought some of the dialogue got a little tropey. His speech at the end that sort of inspired Black Adam to ultimately facilitate Black Adam's escape at the end to come and help the JSA defeat Sabak. A little corny, a little bit, but it worked. It really worked, and I will add that there's been a lot of reviewers. You hear a lot of reviewers will say that, oh man, oh my god, the dialogue was cringe, or this scene was, and like, I mean, was this a flawless movie? No, but I will say this: every time there's a little nitpick of a flaw here and there, what I loved about it is, first of all, they were small, they were minor matters, and by the way, I've only got like maybe 3 or 4. And it's so well paced that the movie doesn't focus on it. The movie doesn't stand still. It's well paced, and it's like, oh, this scene's done. Now it moves on. And that's what I love about it, and it works. And the acting and the characterization is great. Even the limited screen time for the cast, the limited screen time for Atom Smasher and Cyclone, it's such a it's such a well, their time is well used. There's really great moments between Atom Smasher and Cyclone. It sort of hints at a relationship between them, or maybe some attraction. And and and, and there's a wonderful appearance when we start talking about Atom Smasher, about his origins, which maybe I'll let you talk about first. But I thought this really worked, but maybe I overtalked there about Doctor Fate. But I thought, like, I thought this movie worked because one thing about a comic book movie is that if I can love it, I'm a nitpicky bastard because I'm a comic book fan and I love DC, but I even loved the flaws in this movie because it's like it's overcome by just the overall package, and that's what I loved about it. But was
Yeah,
Doctor Fate, your favorite? Who was your favorite JSA character in the movie?
I sort of thought maybe it would be Doctor Fate. I don't know that it is. I was very impressed with Cyclone, who we'll talk about in a second. But let me say again, I'm going to be nitpicky here. Keep in mind, I didn't dislike any of them, and I thought that they all worked. But the changes to Doctor Fate that they made, I wonder about. And yes, it worked. And I sort of, yeah. Why did they change the Ankh symbol? Why did they change his powers? He's certainly a magic user still, and Hawkman references him as, one of the most powerful beings on Earth in terms of magic. But it's sort of, the movie sort of focuses on this idea of him having visions of the future and knowing what people's fate is, thus the name Doctor Fate, which I suppose works for the purposes of this story. But that's not something in the comics that Doctor Fate does a lot. Like, oh, he sees the future. He
Yeah,
knows how
no,
to
he
stop.
doesn't. Yeah,
It's not, that's not really a part of the character. So I wonder about that change. And not that I have ever had in all my years of reading comics, anybody ever say to me, yeah, my favorite character is Dr. Fate. So I imagine if somebody's favorite character is Dr. Fate, they're going to be a bit disappointed in this because it is such a different take. It still feels like Dr. Fate, but the changes that they made, I think, again, for the sake of the story, sort of diminished the character a little bit. And I also wonder if they were worried if if we give people the Doctor Fate from the comics, the audiences are going to think that all we did was rip off Doctor Strange. Here's the thing. Doctor Fate came first. Doctor Fate was created
well,
decades before Doctor Strange.
well,
But
here's
that's really,
yeah, but
go ahead.
they did rip off they did rip off Doctor Strange because of the plot point. And this again, I'm nitpicking. I'm nitpicking because it worked, but they didn't need Doctor Fate to be able to tell the future. That was such an obvious. It's too close to Endgame. Now, look, we comic book readers know that Marvel and DC copy each other all the time on plot points and on power sets. It happens. But when you do it on a movie, it's going to come under closer scrutiny. And it doesn't matter that Doctor Fate came first. The MCU came first in front of the DCU, and they've done a better job of it thus far, and they're 10 years ahead, and arguably even longer. So my argument would be, like, Doctor Fate, they didn't need him to tell the future in this movie. It was
Yeah, I'm not even
unnecessary.
talking. I'm not even talking of like set that aside. Like, yeah, his name's Doctor Fate. He can see the future. What I'm saying is, if you give Doctor Fate his actual power set from the comics, the fact that he's has these spells and the magic, and he can do more than just create shields and drop giant light swords through people. He did that
Yeah,
twice. He
yeah.
did that scene twice. Once to Black Adam, once to Sabak. He is so much more than that. He can create spells to do any number of things. And they didn't lead. He's less, in a way, he's more powerful than the comics because of his constant visions of the future, and in the way he's less powerful because he feels more limited in what he can do besides that. So I don't know. I found that the choices that they made with him a little strange, but again, it all felt like choices that were in service to the story. And it was cool seeing him up there, and he does look cool with all the gold and the blue. His costume is pretty faithful to the comics. Now, I will say the helmet is asymmetrical, which I thought was kind of strange, and there's no eyes, which in the comics it's all like flat and smooth and symmetrical. And you don't see any eyes in the helmet until the helmet is being worn, and then his eyes kind of light up. You lose something, I think, when the eyes aren't there on the helmet. I wasn't a big fan of that. And and normally I am. Normally I like that idea of being faceless. But there's only one scene where the eyes glow, and it's actually when Hawkman is holding the helmet. And that the helmet looks so much better with those glowing eyes that I wish they had done that the entire time.
Yeah. Well,
So yeah, I feel Doctor Fate definitely wasn't my favorite, and I do feel like the changes, although again it still works, and I'm nitpicky. He is probably my least favorite character, just because he probably of all these characters we're going to talk about, he probably has the longest comic book history and the most established comic book history, and so the changes were a little more noticeable to me, as opposed to Cyclone, who I have not read much of Cyclone. Obviously, she shows up in Jeff Johns' JSA run. Um, we know that they changed her into an African American woman, which is fine. It doesn't really affect her origin. She hints at her origin, how it was a bit traumatic, kidnapped, infected with nanites. Um, they gave her this super high IQ, and she's really bright eyed, and the actress is very, very beautiful when they show her using her powers and spinning around, and there's just a real brightness to her, and I thought that the actress did a fantastic job of bringing her to life. Quintessa Swindell is her name, so I was really impressed. And then we'll talk a little bit about her relationship with Atom Smasher, or possible relationship with Atom Smasher, in a second. But yeah, I thought she was great. She had some wonderful moments, and I wouldn't go so far as to say what we have here is enough for her to carry a movie on her own, but I can definitely see some little girls going to see this movie and saying, "Oh, Cyclone, she's my favorite," and that's kind of what you want, right? You want to inspire that next generation of fans. So, what did you think of Cyclone?
I I thought the character was well handled. I say again that if you think of the fact that Cyclone and Atom Smasher don't really play a huge part in this movie, and but they play an important part in the scenes that they're in, and actually they are pretty cool. And if you actually add up their screen time, they actually leave an impact, I think, that exceeds the amount that they're actually on the screen. And they're very, very important. And I think that they were carefully chosen characters precisely because of their skill set. I think Cyclone's wind powers are I think were very well done. The special effects team here is fantastic. I can't emphasize enough. And with Atom Smasher as well. And the way that he works, the rapport between him and Cyclone, despite the fact that they actually just meet in this movie. And one of the things that I found interesting is, and again, if I'm going to nitpick, you know, all of a sudden, after 5,000 years, Black Adam shows up in Kandak, and right away, Amanda Waller contacts Hawkman and says, "Oh, we got a problem." And to be clear, Amanda Waller would appear to still be in charge of Task Force X. And the Justice Society is their own society, but they're sort of like, Amanda Waller contacts Hawkman and let him know that there's probably a problem going on in Kandak, and she shares some files. So interesting that she doesn't send the Suicide Squad in or anything like that. They let the JSA handle it. I found it interesting that Hawkman and Dr. Fate, who are seasoned veterans of the JSA, of the Justice Society of America, you get that impression here. You get the strong impression, of course, because of Dr. Kent Nelson's, who's played by Pierce Brosnan. He's the one he's the oldest member of the Justice Society. But we know Hawkman, if you're a comic book fan, has got reincarnated lives. But they're the veterans on the team. I found it interesting that Cyclone comes along, and this is her first day on the job, and it's Atom Smasher's first day on the job, and you're going to take them to try to take down a Superman level threat. I thought that was almost borderline a little bit irresponsible, but I still thought it was cool. And it's sort of like they did the same thing, frankly, with Tom Holland in the MCU movies, who had very little experience, and all of a sudden he's in Marvel Civil War fighting alongside the rest of the Avengers. So, but in any event, I thought it really worked. And let's not forget, half the Marvel movies that come out are like 3 hours long. I think this movie is 1 hour and 55 minutes. The amount of quality story, in my view, that they cram into here. And it doesn't feel rushed. It feels good. It feels action-packed. I think this is very well done movie. And I think that's why the audience loves it. God forbid you can actually watch this movie and you don't have to leave halfway through to go take a piss. I mean, you You can actually sit in 2 hours and enjoy a good superhero movie that has a little bit of the tropes that they all do, but is a lot of fun to watch. And I mean, shame on you if you never bought your you paid an extra few bucks to get your Black Adam Coke. And I got the popcorn thing with the Black Adam on it as well. When you go, it's a theatrical experience. Dwayne Johnson's been promoting that, and I really hope that people hope that people see this in the theaters as opposed to waiting for it to be on a TV streaming.
Yeah,
But
I've had a few people tell me they're gonna wait, which again, to each your own. It's definitely more comfortable watching a movie in your own home. But yeah, I couldn't wait. I couldn't wait to go see it again. So that's why I've been twice, and I'll probably go see it a third time. As far as the relationship and that choice to bring them, I sort of took that the relationship between Cyclone and Atom Smasher, who we're going to talk about next. Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there, and I enjoyed it. And then we'll talk about this more when we get to Hawkman. But that borderline irresponsible, I sort of took that as that's Hawkman's hubris, right? Like, yeah, we can bring a couple in Amanda Waller's words, some rookies or some people who are very green, because Hawkman believes that we got this. I got this. I got this. So he's not worried about bringing along somebody who's um, less experienced. But so moving on to Adam Smasher, who the actor that plays him, Noah Centino, I thought he again did a fantastic job. He comes across as, in some ways, even more innocent and naive than Cyclone. He doesn't come across as being he doesn't come across as being like an oaf or dumb or unintelligent, but just very inexperienced, and not just inexperienced in terms of superhero, but just inexperienced in life, right? He's very much a little boy at heart, it seems. And um, we get a fantastic scene with Henry Winkler, of all people, as Al Pratt saying, "Take care of yourself out there, and also be sure you take care of my costume that I lent you. It's vintage." So I loved that as well. And it's little things, and I'll give quite a bit of credit to the director of this movie. Hope I'm saying his name right, Jamie Calais Sarah, um, and specifically in terms of how it relates to the way Noah portrays Adam Smasher on the screen as that kind of lovable um, kid who's in a way our wish fulfillment on the screen. Hey, who hasn't wished to have superpowers? And yeah, he's a bit timid at times. He's a little reserved. He's a little scared. And who wouldn't be in terms of being thrust into this battle? He screws up a couple times, including knocking Hawkman out of the air, and then has to apologize.
uh,
Um, but I can really, it's the smallest scene, and some people may not even notice that this happened, but I can sum up his character and the direction of Jamais easily when it comes to Adam Smasher. At the end of the film, when the Justice Society says goodbye to Black Adam after Adam has sort of saved the day, the rest of the Justice Society is all walking away, and Adam Smasher stays back for a moment and then turns to catch up to him. And he's walking along this path, and he could go on the right around this piece of rubble, or he could go on the left around this piece of rubble. But instead, he goes right over the top of this piece of rubble. And it's not like it's a huge thing he has to climb over. He just has to like do one step up. But he turns around, he walks away, he steps right on the piece of rubble and then jumps off of it to the other side, just like a 10 or 11 or 12-year-old would do, right? I mean, for Rocky or I, if we see that rubble, we just kind of detour around it. You go maybe a half step out of your way to the left or right, because that's just what we, as adults, you kind of lose that spring in your step and what have you or whatever. But no, Adam Smasher's still, so young at heart, that's what he does. And I noticed, I didn't notice it the first time I saw the movie, but I noticed it the second time. And I was like, you know what? It's little nuance like that really give you characterization that you may not notice otherwise. So I liked Adam Smasher. He was used a little bit for comedic effect. I thought he looked great whenever he, used his powers and grew to incredible size. And the little seeds planted of a possible romantic relationship between him and Cyclone, I enjoyed those as well. So,
yeah,
what do you think of Adam
I would
Smasher?
add that I think everybody I think all of us we want an Atom Smasher cameo of Henry Winkler in the 1970s being Atom Smasher. You know,
Yeah.
because imagine the Fonz as Atom Smasher. I mean, it's just so funny to imagine, but it's 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 hilarious that just that Henry Winkler was actually the original Atom Smasher. But if you for readers of the JSA, Atom Smasher back in World War II, he was a small guy. He's not tall. That's the like he's just not he's a small statured guy, but that packs a hard punch. And so it's actually perfect casting to see this older Henry Winkler, talking to his grandson and making promises and giving him his suit. And I thought it worked real well. And I don't have much to add to your comments about Atom Smasher. I mean, other than the fact that it plays out so well. He's still learning the ropes. He screws up a number of times. Hawkman says to him a few times, "Me, you, later, and we're gonna have a talk." Because at one time he accidentally he just manages to avoid knocking Black Adam out of the sky as they're combining their efforts. But then in avoiding it, he accidentally knocks Hawkman out of the sky and knocks Hawkman down like he's swatting a fly, and he does it totally by accident. And I thought it was hilarious. And there's moments like that. There's as we're talking, there's so many little scenes that pop into my head. I only saw it once. You saw it twice. I want to go see it again. I think this has a high rewatchability factor, and I can't say that about the majority of the superhero movies that I've seen. There's a whole slew of Marvel movies that are really good. I love Marvel. I'm not putting down MCU movies. MCU movies are still amazing. They're amazing, but a lot of them I don't have an inkling to see twice. A lot of them, if I see them on TV, I'm not. I might still be inclined to turn the channel. This is a movie that I just know if I see this ever in the future on the TV, I'm gonna leave the channel on this movie because it's fun and it's an easy to follow story. You don't have to. It's not complicated, and at some point we'll talk about the themes in this movie. I think there's actually themes in this movie that move forward. This movie does have some thematic depth to it. If you want to bring that to the table and think about what this movie addresses, because there are some very significant issues that one could focus on, because we do that when we read the comics. And I think that in particular, this whole idea of the relationship between Black Adam and Kandak. I mean, Black Adam's relationship with Kandak is different than Superman's relationship with Metropolis. Superman doesn't have the history with Metropolis that Black Adam has with Kandak. Black Adam is the champion of Kandak historically and is arguably could be its leader, but he's choosing not to. At least he chooses not to at the end. He chooses to be its protector, implying that maybe there's democracy for Kandak. But that's not always a good idea. Democracy doesn't have a good track record in a Middle Eastern country. So we know there still might be problems that are moving forward. Amanda Waller clearly does, and we'll talk about that when we talk about the end credit scene, but there's so much here to unpack that if on the surface, if you just want a fun movie, go relax your brain and watch it, good. But there's something to unpack here. If you're a comic book fan like me, I got all these other things going on in my head as I'm watching this thing. There's so many awesome seeds of where this can sprout off into future DC movies that this really is a good movie for that reason. And thank you, Dwayne Johnson, for the passion you bring to this. In the video I did about a year ago, addressing the comic books related to the movie, I made the comment that I wanted Dwayne Johnson to work out less and go to an acting class because I was concerned he wouldn't be able to pull it off. But he pulls this off, and he portrays a stoic Black Adam. He doesn't. This works. I believe that this is a man who's got repressed anger, and when he releases it, it has an impact on his power set. He becomes more powerful. He can lose control of his powers if he gets too angry, and it works with the character and the history that is established, given the loss of his son and his movement and his evolution toward attaining some kind of redemption. And for that reason, I think that there's something to really be enjoyed here.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll talk more about the themes and his Black Adam's choices in a little bit, but I do want to cover the one character we haven't talked about yet from the Justice Society. We haven't talked about Hawkman.
Yeah.
And I really, I really wanted Tim from Hawk World to be able to join us, but unfortunately, he's not going to get to see the movie for a while because it's not showing up in Japan till like December 1st. Because yeah, I just again so curious to see people's reaction to Hawkman. We got so little of his origin, but yet he's got this gigantic mansion with this awesome plane that's hidden underneath this massive lawn that's covered with fountains and whatnot. And that was interesting to me. I mean, clearly Hawkman, who has, you know, reincarnated over time, could be, if he chose, like the richest man in the world based on just you live that long, you gain knowledge, you can, you know, have these investments that go on for centuries. Um, and they sort of leaned into that a little bit. So I liked that. But then in terms of, okay, who is Hawkman as a character? I gotta ask, right? Like, there's been so many different versions of Hawkman, and one could argue that his continuities may be the most convoluted in comics. Now, the recent Hawkman series written by Robert Venditti sort of reconciled that and did a fantastic job of it, reconciling why he's been at times a Thanagarian alien or an ancient prince of Egypt. Like, which is it, right? How can it be both? Well, Venditti was able to explain that. So there's a little bit of this idea of Hawkman as a leader of the Justice Society being like this great tactician and creating plans, and even a bad plan is better than no plan at all. And um, but is that really Hawkman? Because then there's the idea of the Savage Hawkman, who's sort of a hothead, and maybe doesn't think things through and isn't the smartest guy in the room. Um, and they sort of took all those different versions and they sort of mashed them together. Um, because there are times where Hawkman, played by Aldous Hodge, and who does a fantastic job, he's not making the best choices, especially in the moment. He kind of lets his emotions and a little bit of a temper, not to the level of Black Adam, but he's letting his emotions get the best of him, right? I mean, in a way, and this may be one of the things that the critics complain about, and they may have a legitimate beef. I will give them this one. Um, when Hawkman first goes into Kondak and confronts Black Adam and says, you know, we're the Justice Society. We help ensure global stability and peace, and we're willing to use force. We're willing to use violence to ensure that peace. That's so oxymoronic, right? Like, that's
Yeah.
not, you want peace and you want stability, but yet you're going to go in there and cause chaos and all kinds of destruction or whatever. It does, like, you stop and think about it. Did you even try to talk to Black Adam? No, you just went in there guns blazing, right? Like, maybe you could have found a more diplomatic solution. So, um, again, I don't really have an opinion on it one way or the other. It works for this film. This is, you know, by far the most high profile live action version of Hawkman that we've ever gotten. I mean, previously he was played by Michael Shanks, who's one of my favorite actors from Stargate SG-1. One of my dogs is even named Daniel Jackson after his SG-1 character. But in the CW show, we did, I think it was an Arrow, I'm not 100% on that, but or maybe it was Smallville. Anyway, Michael Shanks has played Hawkman in live action before, but not to this prominence, right? Not showing up for this long, not diving this far into the characterization of who Hawkman is. But we get no history. The little hint of him being reincarnated is going to go right over most people's head, because I asked my wife about it after, because I was curious if she got any inkling. When Dr. Fate tells Hawkman that, yeah, he's going to die, and Hawkman says, that's okay. I'm not afraid to die. A casual fan is not going to realize, yeah, he has no fear of death because he is going to be reincarnated. Um, and then my wife said, well, then why was Dr. Fate worried about him dying if he was just going to reincarnate? So, well, that doesn't, just because he's going to be reincarnated doesn't mean he's necessarily going to be reincarnated on Earth. He could be reincarnated, anywhere in the multiverse. So,
Yeah.
yeah, so you could see why Dr. Fate would want to save him. The other thing that was cool, regardless, and again, this goes to something that Robert Venditti just added to the mythos of Hawkman, is the ability for his mace, his classic mace weapon, to change. It was a fantastic scene where he kind of whips it around and transforms it into his battle axe, which was awesome. And that's again something Robert Venditti brought to Hawkman recently. So yeah, I liked Hawkman. This is a different portrayal, trying to mash up all the different versions. Because Venditti's version of Hawkman that we had most recently is a little more cerebral and leans into the idea that if this guy's been alive for as long as he has, why? Of course, he's going to be the best fighter and the best aerialist in the DCU. Um, Leaning into ideas of Savage Hawkman, where he's less intelligent because he's given into his anger. And this tried to marry both of them, and I think it leaves the casual fan maybe a little confused about who Hawkman is. But I think that's okay because they didn't necessarily try to explain it, but it does open up the door to a Hawkman film where you do explore those. And maybe it's the fact that Hawkman himself, Aldous Hodge himself, is having trouble reconciling all these different lives that he's lived, and that's why the characterization can be a little uneven. But yeah, I thought he did a fantastic job. What do you think?
He did a fantastic job, and it's very, very clearly this was by design. The vagueness and the vagueness regarding Hawkman's origins and even Atom Smasher and Cyclone for that matter, that was clearly intentional. People, just to remind people, and some people who aren't into comics don't know this, but Jeff Johns is responsible even before Robert Venditti. Jeff Johns really put Hawkman on the map with his run of Hawkman, and really did a very good job addressing the past lives of Hawkman as well. And Robert Venditti, of course, built on that and arguably even improved on it. And the whole idea here is that this movie does not tell you that Hawkman reincarnates. You just know that Hawkman might die. And of course, those of us who read comics, we know that he is going to reincarnate. But it's still very, very significant. The fact that it's one of those Easter eggs. If you're a fan of the characters, you can fill in the blanks however you like, and it allows future Black Adam movies or even a potential JSA movie to explore that. Even a Hawkman movie to explore that. The actor who plays Hawkman, Aldous Hodge, even said he says he wants to have a Hawk girl, a Hawk woman. He wants a Hawkman movie, and they can go in different directions because they've been vague enough here. But this is all the questions. What you do reveal about Hawkman here is he's got nth metal. So they mention nth metal a couple of times. They mention that the ship is made of nth metal, which makes it virtually indestructible. What they don't really mention, but you can infer it if you're listening and paying a lot of attention. The metal, his axe, everything is nth metal. That's why, even though he's only human, Hawkman can withstand an attack by Black Adam, is because the nth metal protects him. The nth metal has got lot of properties, and the nth metal can cause damage even to Sabbac. Even when Hawkman battles Sabbac at the end, he can cut Sabbac because nth metal does have an impact on magical beings, of which essentially Black Adam and Sabbac, a lot of their power set are magic related. And so he can hold his own against Black Adam because of the nth metal, and that is offset against Eternium. And Eternium is essentially an element that plays a role in the movie. It's kind of a MacGuffin. It's not really necessary, but we got these DC metals, nth metal and Eternium. And Eternium is like a shard from the Rock of Eternity, where the wizard essentially lives, that gave the powers to Billy Batson and ultimately played a role with the other wizards of giving the power of Shazam to Black Adam. But in any event, it's all of this is in there. And if you're diehard fans and you've been paying attention, you love DC and you like the comics, it's there. Hawkman is a really great character. He's by far the most flushed out member of the JSA. His argument with Black Adam, I think he loses that argument. I think that critics are right to point out that this is kind of a little bit hypocritical. But you know what? It's also in keeping with his character. You mentioned, Jace, about how, Hawkman is a hothead. In the comics, he's a hothead. And he's true to form here. And of course, Teth Adam and Hawkman are gonna have a meeting of the minds here, and they're not going to agree. And I love the fact that they don't really want to like each other in this movie, and I like that. They're reluctant allies, and even at the end when they when Black Adam comes back, they're going to give Black Adam a chance. You can tell it's like they still these aren't guys that are going to be having Thanksgiving dinner together, and that's what I like. And all of this, and you still have Amanda Waller with the Suicide Squad, and then you got the GSA, and what's the relationship between the Amanda Waller and Suicide Squad, and Hawkman, and there's the morality here is it's not entirely clear. Hero, anti-hero. There's a lot of blurring of the lines, and I kind of like that because it adds some gravitas to the characterizations, in particular between Hawkman and Black Adam.
Yeah, I agree with you. In terms of the meeting of the minds, it did allow them to give us a moment that we talked about where Black Adam is sort of defeating the Justice League symbolically, I'll say. So, yeah, having a Hawkman movie, I guess this one needs to do really, really well.
Yeah, I hope it does. High audience score, right?
Yeah,
that's what it needs.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we sort of touched on Amon already, played by Bodhi Sabanji. So we don't really need to go into him, but any deeper. But I think everybody did a fantastic job on the cast, and again, a lot of credit to Dwayne Johnson for not just making this a vanity piece where he's on the screen 99% of the time. We did get plenty of the rest of the cast. But in terms of Black Adam himself and the themes, the theme that really stood out for me was this idea of, and Dwayne Johnson utters the line several times, I'm not a hero. He doesn't see himself as a hero. And it doesn't really make sense to you until you do see the moment where his son sacrifices himself. And it's not even a known sacrifice. That's one thing, right? To be noble and, hey, I'm going to save my father. I know I'm going to be killed. No, he just wants his father to survive. There's a love there between father and son. He transfers his powers to his father so his father could be healed, has a big smile on his face, and then he's killed, right? It's a traumatic moment. We don't know necessarily what the son was thinking, Harut, in terms of, hey, was he then going to say, okay, Dad, you're healed, give me the powers back? Like we have no idea. It just goes to the purity of heart for Harut. But, based on that moment, based on that event, yeah, Black Adam, he doesn't see himself. Teth Adam does not see himself as a hero, not at any point. But it could be argued that he truly is, or there's something heroic in him, because even Adriana at one point says, when you first woke up in that tomb and there was a rock about to fall and crush me, you saved me. Your first instinct was to protect me. He's heroic enough that he voluntarily gives up his powers. He gives up his powers at one point. And he has a chance at the end to be the king, to be the ruler, to be the leader of Kahndaq, and instead chooses to be its protector. So just about every chance he's getting, he's stepping back. He's stepping back from saying, look at me, I'm the greatest, I'm the hero, I deserve the power I have, and that sort of thing. And for me, that's the theme that kind of resonated the most. There are plenty of other themes, societal and otherwise, that are sort of touched on, but they're definitely in the background. And some of the reviews that I read, they're like, yeah, it had the opportunity to be this political statement and they could have leaned into this or that. I'm like, this is a superhero movie. It's supposed to entertain. It's not supposed to be a political statement. It's enough to put the ideas in there. It can start conversations, but I don't think The Rock is trying to put out a movie that talks about the way the Western civilization has neglected the politics of the Middle East and how we should go in there and police things or shouldn't go in there and police things. Like, that's neither here nor there. That's not the point of this movie. That's not the job of this movie. So what the hell are you talking about?
And I would add to that, but it also does the movie does have politics in it if you choose to see it. I mean, because the very fact that those critics are saying, what I wish it would have dealt more with the politics, well, it's because the political seeds are there. and they're fairly obvious that they're there. The people of Kandak here, they want Black Adam to be their champion, and it doesn't bother them that Black Adam might kill because he's killing terrorists. And there's clearly hypocrisy there that that we've talked about, that the JSA comes along. I mean, Amanda Waller of all people. I mean, this woman's psychotic. I mean, we've seen the Suicide Squad movies. Amanda Waller, we're going to follow. Amanda Waller's going to have the audacity to say that Black Adam is a threat to the people of Kandak. Are you kidding me? On what basis? I mean, the hypocrisy is there. And quite frankly, I think it's a perfect illustration. If, like, not that I want to get political, but if you want to get political, of course, U.S. international policy and foreign policy has been hypocritical at times. They've destroyed certain regimes, placed their own regime that they've wanted here or there. The fact of the matter is, Amanda Waller wants to control Black Adam, and even that's in this movie, because at one point when Black Adam gives up his powers, he's even Amelia Harcourt shows up, and they want to take control of Black Adam, and they cage him somewhere, I think in the deep ocean, and so he can't say the word Shazam. And so, I mean, again, the hypocrisy is there, and ultimately it's Dr. Fate that has to free him because they need help against Sabek. But I mean, the fact that, in fact, I could criticize this movie and say, like, and in fact, if I'm really being nitpicky, again, a real nitpick, I can't. It never made sense to me that Black Adam surrendered at one point, and that didn't make sense to me. That's not in Black Adam's character. He would never have done that in the comic books. That's not in. There was no reason for Black Adam to surrender when he did in the movie. However, there's enough emotional underpinning there that, because of the grounding and the power of the loss of his son and him wanting to do right by his son, that's what gave him the motivation to surrender, because he didn't want to betray that. He wanted to honor his son, and he felt maybe he had determined he had crossed the lines, so I just countered my own argument there. I can see it. Again, my Black Adam is a little bit more darker, but I can see Black Adam getting more dark, because in the DC universe, every hero in the DC universe, how come more heroes aren't involved in politics? Why can't Black Adam be more involved in politics? Why can't he take more of an aggressive role? Why shouldn't he be the ruler and the protector of Kandak? He'd be he might do a better job. But in any event, the fact that this is the type of discussion that this is supposed to inspire. This is what makes the comic books interesting. You and I can disagree about Black Adam, about what he should be or what his character does, but that's what makes it a compelling movie. And what I find ironic is that the very thing the critics are complaining about is exactly what makes this a good movie.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. He is a darker character that's mentioned. It's addressed. I wondered about that moment where he surrendered. Early on in the movie, there's a great line where he says, "I'm not peaceful. I don't surrender," and then he turns around and does. And I just took that. So that was the first time he lost control of his powers since he did it and almost destroyed the kingdom of Kandak. So he does that, early on, and after he receives the powers from his son is killed. He immediately goes to the king. He lets his rage out, basically, destroys the king, destroys the palace, nearly destroys the kingdom of Kandak, and then immediately is imprisoned by the wizards for 5,000 years and has nothing to do but think about how he's betrayed the memory of his son by letting his rage get the best of him, right?
Yeah.
Even after, even being imprisoned and not having anything to really do, that feeling and that memory is going to fade. Even if you have nothing else to do to kind of supplant it, I think it fades in 5,000 years. But then in this movie, he goes to help try to rescue Amon. And even after he's already successfully stopped him from being killed, his rage gets the best of him. And again, he explodes, his power explodes. So I just took that moment where he surrendered as this is the first time in 5,000 years where he's made that same mistake that he made previously, that in his mind dishonored the memory of his son. And so I could see him being at his lowest at that moment and giving in to this idea that, yeah, I should surrender. all I do is hurt people. Yeah, he's very he's very down on himself. So I actually I think that made it a better movie. The fact that it made him more relatable. It made us realize he's not, indestructible. And again, something else I've heard critics talk about here. He's this cardboard cutout anti-hero badass. No, Dwayne Johnson portrays him as much more complex and much more emotional than that. That his emotions, his feelings, his memory of his son can bring him down. Right? That might be his weakness. So I didn't mind that that he surrendered. I thought it worked. So
Yeah.
yeah, all in all, a fantastic movie.
So what do you think of the villain? What do you think of Sabek? Was a disposable
Uh,
villain? Did it
yeah,
had enough depth
yeah.
for you, or what?
Yeah, he's very much a disposable villain. If you want to look for depth, just this idea of resentment for the inhabitants of Kandak, and kind of leans into this idea of people from the Middle East being very proud. There's a moment where Ishmael, who eventually becomes Sabek, says, um, at one point, Kandak was something even better than free. It was powerful.
Yeah.
So this idea that even more than valuing freedom, the people of Kandak value power, right? To be able to vanquish their enemies and what have you. And that's a very small-minded and insular way of thinking. I don't know if I'd go so far as to say it's an evil way of thinking, but it definitely, you understand why Ishmael makes the decisions that he makes. Um, so yeah, I thought a bit of a disposable villain. I wouldn't expect to see him again, but it did give us the opportunity to see the underworld, which is kind of a
Yeah.
upside. It rains upside down there. Even the rain comes up from the ground. It really cool visually, which you already mentioned. Yeah, the visuals in this movie are absolutely spectacular. And there's a scene early on where Black Adam comes out of his tomb, and it all happens in slow motion. And when that first happened, it kind of bothered me. I was like, oh my god, we're going to the super slow mo. You want to talk about the tropes? But as the scene unfolded, it makes perfect sense why this happens, right? Because Black Adam is sort of moving in normal speed, but everybody else is nearly frozen, and he manipulates weaponry and all kinds of debris and what have you to just completely kick the crap out of Intergang. And I just don't know how else you do that scene in any other way other than the way they did it, to show how fast Black Adam he can move so fast. So I thought that worked really well. The other thing visually that I really loved was the fact that when Black Adam flies, he's just floating around from place to place, upright. Not flying horizontally the way a lot of the Superman or a lot of the other heroes do. And when you think about it, that is sort of the way you would do it if you had the ability to fly. You just float around wherever. And then the director does a fantastic job using that later on when Black Adam does surrender. It's the time you see him touch the ground, right? Like he's grounded down here with the rest of us mortals. So I really enjoyed that the way they just had him float around from place to place, and it also allowed us to see Black Adam as something kind of above and different, and how he is kind of separated by that 5,000 years, by the fact he does have the power of a god. And then at the end, again, he's closer down to the ground, even though he could still be floating. He's got his powers back. He said the word Shazam. He's still walking, So
Yeah.
he's no longer separate from us. So little things like that really work. So visually, absolutely spectacular movie. But to get back to your original question, the villain is not. I mean, great visually, really cool looking, and looked like he stepped out of a comic book page. So I did appreciate that. But there's not really any depth there for the most part. What about you? What do you think?
Yeah. Well, it was definitely disposable a little bit, but this at least there was considering how disposable he was needed to be disposable for the plot, and I really liked how he came into being, and it made a lot of sense. I think from a storytelling point of view, I think this was well scripted. quite frankly. That the fact that he came into being because they'd already won the day. There was a period the movie could have ended because Black Adam surrenders. He rescues Armand from the clutches of Intergang, whose leader essentially becomes Sabak because he's got the crown of, because basically they're looking for the crown of Sabak, which is this which is contains the powers of the seven demons or whatever, and it's it's upon dying that the lead villain becomes Sabak, and it works, but it takes him a while to turn into Sabak, and then ultimately that requires Doctor Fate to to inspire Black Adam to escape his cage in the recesses of Task Force X at the bottom of the ocean. So it all comes into force very well. How Black Adam defeats Sabak. I mean, amazing special effects. What a way to die. What a way to kill a villain. Not too many villains die like Sabak dies in this movie. Fantastic. And you know that those seven demons, just like, we got to remember, just like the Wizard has had different people with the power of Shazam. We got Captain Marvel, the Marvel family. We got Black Adam. Somebody else, those seven demons, they can give somebody else the power of Sabak. And so it's the right kind of disposability of this villain, because this power can return to any other type of villain that could be even more deadly. So I thought it really worked. But now, finally, let's talk about the post-credit scene. And I'm curious to hear
Yeah,
your thoughts about.
we gotta talk about the post-credit scene. I do sort of. So, I mean, unless you've been living under a rock, no pun intended, it sort of got spoiled. DC did so well to keep, and Warner Brothers did so well to keep this under wraps. There was rumors of Henry Cavill. We know from the Zack Snyder films plays Superman. I'm a huge Henry Cavill fan, and I'm a fan of him playing Superman. I don't think that he's gotten a fair shake because he hasn't gotten good stories to portray Superman, and the characterization that David Goyer and Zack Snyder have given Henry Cavill and Superman has been wildly inaccurate, and just takes away from who Superman is fundamentally, and it just doesn't work. So yeah, we thought, okay, Henry Cavill's going to show up at San Diego Comic-Con in the Black Adam panel because he's in the movie, and they didn't. He didn't show up. But then the week the movie comes out, Rock is over there spoiling on every talk show that Henry Cavill shows up. So I sort of wish that it was a little more kept under wraps. I can understand why the businessman, the marketing aspect of Dwayne Johnson did say that Superman, because then it does drive interest in the film. Um, so I say all that to say Amanda Waller's a piece of crap. I've always said Amanda Waller's a piece of crap. I totally agree with you about her being hypocritical. Who is she to tell anybody what to do about anything? And when she says in the end credits scene that, I Black Adam says something like, "You can't stop me from leaving Kandak. There's nobody on this earth that can stop me." And she says, "Well, I have favors. I can call in people not of this earth, whatever." I sort of feel like with who Amanda Waller is, and don't get me wrong, um, the actress that plays Amanda Waller is
Viola Davis or
Viola Davis. Yeah,
Viola
Viola
Davis.
Davis is a fantastic actress, and she brings Amanda Waller to life. She's despicable and unlikable, and that's exactly if you want her to be like she is in the comics, like fantastic. You just want to see her get her due. I sort of feel like if you want to give us the Superman from the comics, like Superman's not doing any favors for Amanda Waller. If anything, he's going to Amanda Waller and locking her up in the deepest, darkest hole he can find. She is an out villain, and DC has sort of pivoted to that in comics with what we saw in the War for Earth 3, and I've been saying it for years that she's one of the worst villains of the DC universe. So to have her calling the shots, it doesn't make a whole heck of a lot of sense, and I agree with Black Adam that it's completely hypocritical. So all that being said, when Henry Cavill does show up, when he steps out of the shadows wearing that Superman costume, I was good. I was good. I could have bought my ticket, gone in, sat down, watched that 30 seconds, and felt like I got my money's worth. Like that's how much I loved Superman. That's how much I loved seeing Henry Cavill on the screen in that Superman costume. And oh my God, I want a true Superman film with Henry Cavill playing the title role. A real Superman film, not a film where Superman kills somebody or is out there, you know, I would argue that the Zack Snyder, David Goyer version of Superman characterization is closer to who Black Adam is than who Superman is. And we need to get away from that, right? We need to get away from that. Now, I will give Zack Snyder a little bit of credit that he seemed to be heading in that direction with the portrayal of Superman we got in the Justice League film. Once he kind of came to the realization of who he was. But we certainly didn't get to where we needed to be. So it's interesting because I think the contrast having, if Black Adam 2 is Superman versus Black Adam or whatever, or the first half, I mean, you might get some blowback. People might say, well, this is just Batman and Superman all over again, or Batman versus Superman, right? Black Adam and Superman fight each other in the beginning and then come together and team up to fight a bigger threat, like with Batman versus Superman and Doomsday. So I don't know. I don't know where Henry Cavill, I don't know where the story goes from here, but I do hope that we get another Superman film with Henry Cavill in it. Because, yeah, even though I knew he showed up in the mid-credit scenes, I still love to see it. It didn't take away or diminish. And I don't know, like if The Rock hadn't spoiled it, would I have been surprised? I still don't think I would have been surprised, especially the way it's choreographed in the scene, right? When Dwayne Johnson says, yeah, there's no one on Earth that can stop me. There's no one from this planet who can stop me if I choose to leave Kandak. And she says, well, I have people that aren't from this planet. At that moment, Superman's going to show up. So did you hear ahead of time that Superman was going to be in the...
It was fairly obvious.
Yeah.
Well, Dwayne Johnson was booed at San Diego Comic-Con. He was booed. And part of the rumor is that he took that to heart because he was teasing. He left that, and at least according to Grace Randolph, that Dwayne Johnson was more motivated than ever to get on board, to get Henry Cavill on board, because Henry Cavill was not on board. That scene was filmed in September. It was filmed in mid to late September. This was a last-minute addition. They finally got Henry Cavill on board because the old Warner Brothers didn't want him because there was that falling out and what have you and all that other jazz. But in any event, here's my take on this end credits scene. It is in my view misdirection. If you actually look at that scene, Superman is not antagonistic toward Black Adam at all. At all. Nor is Black Adam antagonistic towards Superman in that end credit scene. Superman says to him, it's been a while since somebody has made this world basically as so nervous. Superman is almost referencing himself. The last person to make the entire world as nervous as Black Adam was Superman and General Zod in Man of Steel. That was a reference to Man of Steel. And that's really all you need. We don't need all the other Batman movies and all the DC movies. We don't need any of that. You just need Man of Steel. The last time the world was this nervous over one superpowered person, it was Superman, and i.e. General Zod. Now, is Black Adam a General Zod, or is Black Adam another hero? That's all Superman wants to know. And he says, we have to talk. And they're going to talk. And it wasn't antagonistic. It wasn't unfriendly. Superman looks bright blue, and it looks like they're going to have a conversation. And that's the way it should be. This is Superman acting in character. Some critics say, well, why didn't Superman show up while they were fighting Sabbac and everything else? Anybody who's read a comic book knows the answer to that question. Superman is busy. He might have been off. There's 1,000 different reasons why Superman wasn't around while the JSA was there battling Sabbac with Black Adam. This is a superhero.
There's only one reason. There's only one reason, because this is The Rock's movie. This is a Black Adam movie, not a Superman movie.
Right, but I mean, within obviously, I'm speaking within the continuity and the universe itself. What I'm saying is that this movie does possess verisimilitude. If you're into this movie and into the universe as established by the DC comic book universe, this movie works. And despite its flaws, it is a. I'm not even gonna. I was gonna say one guy called it a beautiful mess. No, this isn't messy. There's nothing messy about this movie. This is a beautifully well-paced movie. There's a lot of story jam-packed into it. It doesn't insult the viewer's intelligence. In fact, it expects you maybe to know some things before going in. It expects you to know a little bit about Man of Steel. It expects you to know a little bit about the rest of the DC universe. It doesn't insult your intelligence. It doesn't spoon feed you. You know, I always said, if Zack Snyder made this movie, I would almost expect there'd be scenes where we'd get 20 minutes of superfluous dialogue establishing nothing or establishing who Amanda Waller. We don't need that. We don't need that. This is a good length of a movie, enjoyable. And look, if you don't like superhero movies, you're not going to see this. You're not going to go to this movie anyway. But if you're going to this movie and you have any kind of enjoyment of a superhero movie, I can't see anybody not liking this. I mean, this is just plain an adrenaline rush. And I'm also going to add. I'm compelled to add this that you know I'm a DC fan first and foremost. I love Marvel, but I'm a DC lover. And the reality is that MCU fans, Marvel fans, you've got you got a better universe. You got billion-dollar movies. You've had your fun, and you continue to have your fun. It's these, it's okay for DC to get a little bit of the limelight every now and then. I don't care if this imitates or duplicates some occasional MCU plot point or so. I don't care. I want my DC superheroes on the big screen. That's what this gives us. And kudos to Dwayne Johnson. Thank you for his passion because he delivered a hell of a movie.
Yeah, and I don't even think you. Oh, hey, there, Black Adam is stealing ideas and story points from
Yeah,
MCU movies. No, Black Adam is taking story points and plot threads from comic books,
that's right.
which is what all of this stuff is based on. So
Yes.
it's not that they're stealing from MCU. MCU is not the first one to come up with these tropes. Okay, this comes from comic books, and they have existed far longer than these films.
Yeah.
So yeah, get off your high horse, MCU fans. As far as yeah, that end credit scenes being misdirection, I agree with you 100%. That's part of what I loved about it. Yeah, it is Henry Cavill, you could argue, being Superman most accurately than he's ever been on the big screen because Zack Snyder's not involved. You're 100% about the, yeah, we need to talk. Here's the thing I worry about. I would love that if when Black Adam and Superman next shared the screen together, if they didn't fight,
Yeah.
that would be fantastic if they didn't lean into that trope. Um, but I'm sure that the bigwigs over at Warner Brothers Discovery are saying, "Oh, but that's what people want to see," because Dwayne Johnson's been going around for years saying Black Adam's the most powerful being in the DC universe, and that's traditionally when you talk about the most powerful hero or most powerful character, you're talking about Superman. So yeah, we got to see the spectacle, we got to see the big fight, blah blah blah, whatever. But yeah, it would be nice if they went away from that trope and instead, if we got another Justice League movie or if we got
A good villain. Get some super
Yeah.
villains. Get Ultraman. Get A-level villains. Brainiac. I mean, have them Black Adam and Superman
Give us
team up.
Darkseid.
Yeah,
Give
or
us
even
Darkseid.
sure. Yeah, whatever. I mean, there's Monitor. There's Anti-Monitor. There's all kinds of there's a million different villains that they could
But
have.
here's the thing: no matter who they give us as villains, as a villain, it will be somebody who can, even if they decide to lean away from the whole. There's a misunderstanding,
Yeah.
and Superman and Black Adam have to fight. Then they'll just give us a villain that it somehow takes over Superman or takes over Black Adam. Because I promise you, somebody over there at Warner Brothers is saying we absolutely have to have Dwayne Johnson and Henry Cavill punching each other on the big screen because that's what people want to see.
Yeah.
And my argument to that would be, you'd be surprised how little I want to see that, and
Well,
we would rather just see them fighting side by side. And then their response to that will be, well, why can't we have both?
Well,
Um,
I would warn them. I would warn them because Batman v Superman, which I didn't mind the movie. The reality is, in the Batman v Superman movie, that entire movie was wasted trying to build up a justification for why they would fight, and it wasn't well done. It wasn't
yep.
well done. And to make it even worse, Batman v Superman really only had about 10 minutes of fighting screen time between Batman and Superman. It wasn't actually a lot of screen time dedicated to their actual one-on-one. And it's not so it if you're going to do it, I would want them to embrace the comic book trope of misunderstanding, okay, then team up. But I mean, you can do it in a better way. There's a better way to do it here with if you follow if you follow the comic books, it's in the source material. It's a very, very believable story narrative of what might set Black Adam to have some issues with what happens to his family, and if it's very easy to imagine manipulation of and interactions with international relations, foreign affairs, the world, a misunderstanding, and that and then you get, Lex Luthor level type of machinations. It's so easy to imagine that, and Superman coming to the rescue, and Batman as well. This is so cool. I mean, if they do it right, it all comes down to the writing. But I mean, the seeds are there. But remember the mistakes of Batman v Superman if you're going to do this, and don't repeat them.
I would rather have rather than a misunderstanding. I would rather just have, even though it's super tropey, I'd rather have some kind of mind control, magic,
Huh.
whatever takes over Black Adam, and
Sure.
Superman's reluctantly fighting him the entire time, saying, "Hey, Teth Adam, you got to wake up."
Yeah.
Maybe in Black Adam's mind, he sees Superman as Sabak
Yeah.
returned.
I actually like that. I like your idea. I like that. That's
Yeah.
even
That
better. Yeah.
in my mind, that's better than a because there's no misunderstanding in my mind where Superman would go flying off half cocked. At least
Yeah.
not the true version of Superman. Yeah. So anyway, that's Black Adam. That's the Black Adam film. We recommend it. Don't listen to those cynical critics who apparently want every film that comes down the pipe to be wholly original and the best thing they've ever seen. And I just don't know what it's a superhero movie. To Rocky's point earlier, if you're not a fan of superhero movies, you're not going to go see this anyway. But if you're a fan of superhero movies and you expect to see, some good characterization, some good acting, some amazing special effects, and just be entertained, that's exactly what this movie is, and why I think everybody who's a DC fan or a superhero film fan to go and see this movie. Definitely gets my highest recommendation.
Absolutely. And I just want to show, I want people, I did have, I got some action figures here. This is another one of showing on YouTube here. This is the action figures that I bought. I mean, they're amazing. McFarlane action figures. Todd McFarlane, his toy company, McFarlane Toys, does an amazing job. These figures are just incredible. It's close enough to, well, it's not Christmas. We're coming on Halloween here, but whatever, man. These make great presents. If your kids love Black Adam, go pick up these toys. They're amazing sculpts. Just so well done. So I got to give a shout out to the Black Adam toys and paraphernalia. It's really good. So shout out to Todd McFarlane. Did a great job on the merchandising here.
Yeah, so again, thanks everybody for joining. Be sure you subscribe to the channel that you're watching this on. If you saw the social media post and discovered Rocky's channel, be sure you subscribe. Comic Space Boom ! Like, subscribe, comment, all that kind of great stuff. Over at the Comic Source YouTube channel, there's an unboxing video that Rocky and I did recently. I've let the comics I've bought on eBay and other places build up for far too long. So we had a couple drinks and just kind of unboxed these comics and had fun talking about why I bought them and how drunk I must have been to buy 14 copies of one book. But anyway, check that out. And then be sure you tune in weekly for our DC Spotlight that comes out on Tuesdays. And Rocky has an independent spotlight he does every weekend with Jim from Weird Science. And then over on the Comic Source, wherever you can or wherever you prefer to get your podcast, do a search for the Comic Source and subscribe so you don't miss any of our audio-only content, reviewing other books and interviews and all that sort of stuff. So we appreciate you guys joining as always, and we will talk to you next time.
Catch you later.